Okay, good morning, everybody.
Morning, Rabbi.
So we'll get started with Sif Yud Daled today. That's what we're up to. We're talking about the laws of a shaliach and what his rights are. And we pointed out that if for whatever reason the shaliach is left with a surplus of either goods or cash from his dispatcher, that even though it was because of him that that surplus was left over, since it was never transacted at all, he has to return it in its totality to the person who dispatched him. And in Sif Yudalid we learn V'chol zeh kishenosen mishaleach lishliach bistam. All of the aforementioned only applies when the dispatcher gave the merchandise or the cash to his proxy without making any further stipulations. Aval im amar la shaliach, mechor bekach bekach, o kenei bekach bekach bekach, v'hamosar shelcha. But if he says explicitly to the shaliach, look, I'm selling widgets. I want you to get $10 per widget. Or I want to buy widgets and I'm giving you cash and I want you to pay $10 per widget. And if you get any surplus, then you get to keep the surplus. So if you can buy the widgets for $8, then you can get to keep the surplus cash. Or if you can sell the widgets for $12, all I want is 10 and you get to keep the extra $2. Hare hakol shalo b'chol inyan. Since the stipulation was made explicitly, the shaliach is allowed to keep whatever is stipulated. Ki shuv eno yochol lachzor bo hamishaleach klal, afal pisha hamishaleach shasak v'lo klum kishar melokein. And it's important to note that once such a stipulation is made, then the dispatcher cannot rescind that offer. And that's true even when the proxy was silent during the stipulation. In other words, if the proxy was silent, the dispatcher could say, well, you didn't seem to care very much when I offered you that. I had no idea that these widgets were so valuable that you could get $15 on the market when I told you to sell them for 10. The shaliach could say to him, yes, sir, but at the end of the day, you told me explicitly that I can keep whatever surplus I am able to acquire above and beyond the $10 per widget. So that's mine. Halachically, he can't rescind that deal, even if he has remorse. Excuse me. Even if he has remorse afterwards that this was not that he realized that he undercut him himself by sending out his proxy in that way, cannot rescind. So what does the Imrei Yaakov say? Not very much over here. Ayin Beis. Hakol Shalo, the shaliach gets to keep all of the surplus. Hainu im kvar machra. This is provided that he's already sold the widgets. Aval mikol makom kol zman shelo machra yachal hamishaleach lachzor bo. But if the shaliach hasn't yet made the sale, then the mishaleach can stop him and say, you know what, I've changed my mind. Right? It's only after the shaliach makes the sale and sells the widgets for $15 each instead of $10 each. That's where we say that, look, the transaction has already been done. Your stipulation is upholdable by law. Okay. And the fact of the matter is that a dispatcher can nullify the proxyship at any time so long as it has not been consummated. In other words, the halacha basically states, as far as shlichus, as the laws of proxyship are concerned, that if I send someone out to execute a deal for me, I can abort that proxyship up until he actually goes ahead and does it for me. Okay, let's go on to the next halacha, or shashliach shasak. One more piece in the Imrei Yaakov, shahashaliach shasak, and that's true even if the shaliach was silent at the time when the dispatcher made their statement. Demistama hiskim ledvara v'adai dedachi lachaliyada. He says, because we have to assume that the shaliach was desirous of that stipulation, and he only went to the bother of selling the widgets on his dispatcher's behalf because he heard such a stipulation. The dispatcher doesn't have the right to say, well, it didn't seem to bother you one way or the other. You were prepared to do it even if I wasn't going to give you the surplus. The shaliach could say, once you told me, I went the extra mile and I wanted to go ahead and see how much I could make off of the deal. So therefore, that's why I was able to get a higher price for it, because I held out, because I knew that the surplus would be mine. You can't now turn around and tell me that you want to keep it. Okay. Tesvav. Let's go on to the next halacha. Ve'ein hashaliach rashai limkor la'atzmo o liknos me'atzmo mipnei hachshad sheyachshaduhu shemozu la'atzmo. So here's what a shaliach is not allowed to do. The dispatcher, the guy who owns the widgets, sells the shaliach. Here, go ahead, I'm hiring you for such and such, and I'm going to hire you to sell my widgets on the marketplace. So the shaliach is not allowed to buy the widgets himself. Let's say he needs widgets. He's in the market for widgets. Is he allowed to buy them himself? So the halacha is he's not allowed to buy them himself, because he'll place himself under suspicion that he's giving himself an unfair discount. So, Ela imkain omer lo hamishaleach sukum hamekach katsuv, unless the dispatcher tells him, this is the fixed price on the widgets, they're $10 a piece. Once he tells him the fixed price, so then the shaliach, sha'az mekakho kayim, im yisratze lo hamishaleach. So then, as long as the mishaleach gets $10 for each widget, then the shaliach is allowed to participate in the purchase also. He's allowed to make that purchase himself. But what if the mishaleach says, go out to market and see what you can sell these for, don't bring me less than 10 per widget? Then the shaliach would not be permitted to go and buy them himself at 10 or even 11, because who knows, maybe he could have gotten a better price. And essentially what the Shulchan Aruch Harav is stating is, don't put yourself in a position where there's going to be the possibility of recriminations. And we have a general halacha of chashad, of don't allow yourself to be put in a position where people might suspect that you're doing something underhanded. There's a halacha called v'yisem nikiyim me Hashem u'me Yisrael. There's a law that you have to be innocent in the eyes of both God and Israel. So even if the shaliach can justify paying $10 per widget because he knows that's what other people would pay, but the mishaleach doesn't know that. And when the shaliach comes back and says, I sold your widgets for 10, even though you told me to sell them not less than 10, I was able to get 10 for them. Oh, the Mishalech says, oh, so who did you sell them to? The Mishalech says, oh, I bought them myself. So the Mishalech is immediately going to have resentment against the Shalech and say, oh, so you decided that you were going to try to make a living off of my widgets. So instead of doing the proxy ship, you went ahead and bought them yourself. Now you're going to keep them in your warehouse for a few days, and you're going to go turn them over and sell them for 12. And that's going to create a big broigus. It's going to create a big upset. But if the Mishaleach says, I just want $10 per widget, that's the fixed price, I'm not asking you to get more for them, then the Shaliach has a right to buy them himself. Okay. Now, next part of the halacha is regarding an apotropos. So what is an apotropos? That seems to be a Greek word, and it literally means a custodian. And it's I think today we might more call it a trustee, because what it is, or maybe we would call it a custodian, I'm not sure. It's a person who is appointed by the Beis Din to be in charge of the estate of orphans who are minors. And let's say a parent dies, they leave over an estate and they leave over minor orphans. The Beis Din has a responsibility to appoint an adult who will watch over their estate, and he gets compensated for that effort.
But
And
might that be a guardian? Is that the same thing?
it could be a guardian. Yeah, you sometimes have a
Yeah.
court-appointed guardian, right? And the guardian,
Is he responsible for the children too, or
um,
just the estate?
we have no indication whether or not he's responsible for the children, but he is responsible to maintain their assets and to try and be able to increase or at least maintain the value of their assets. So he's got to sometimes invest their assets, and sometimes he's got to sell off certain of their assets in order to be able to feed the kids, in order to be able to make sure that they have enough money to sustain themselves. So obviously, since we're talking about chashad, we're talking about avoiding recriminations and suspicion from yourself. A guardian or a custodian of an estate certainly has to be worried or concerned about that he doesn't do anything that would be perceived to be self-serving and exploiting the orphans in the process. Okay? So an apotropos eno rashai limkor klum la'atzma. He's never allowed to, let's say he says that we need to raise capital for these orphans, and there's a lot of sellable items in the estate. So the Beis Din agrees that you can sell whatever items you need to sell in order to raise capital for the orphan. Well, he's not allowed to sell anything to himself. He can't say, well, I'll buy this stuff, because there's a concern that he's going to give himself an undue discount. Afilu mocher al pi Beis Din. Even if Beis Din gives him permission and he tells him the price, he's still not allowed to do that, because the optics of it are very bad. Okay? Aval, but here's what he is allowed to do. Mutter lo lekabel mo shel hayisomim lemachatzi schar u'lishlish u'revia kamo sheyitzku lo haBeis Din. But what he is allowed to do is he's allowed to invest. He can invest the money of the orphans, even if it's with his own investment firm. So, for example, let's say he runs an investment firm where he takes investors' money and he gives them a return on the investment. And this is what we call an iska. It's an investment arrangement where an investor, let's say, invests $1,000 towards a business endeavor, let's say, a certain corporate endeavor, and the investor, the person handling the investment, basically says, you're investing in this company or buying stocks in this company, and I am entitled to, through my efforts, I am entitled to a percentage of the return on your investment. So if you end up making 10% profit on your investment, so you make $1,100 on a $1,000 investment, I get 2 or 3 points of that return, because I've invested your money for you. So the halacha is that it is mutter for an apotropos to invest the money of the yasomim into his own business endeavors, provided that he promises them a fixed amount of return on their investment, based on whatever the standard of that investment returns is. Kamash yipsekulo haBeis Din. Everything according to what Beis Din assigns as what the fair market amount is that a return on such an investment should be. Sha'az ein chashad b'davar. Because in that situation, there's no longer a reason to be suspicious, because what he's doing is he's not purchasing from the orphans, he's investing and guaranteeing them a return. And in that situation, since he's guaranteeing them a return and it's a fair amount on the return, it's market value that's fixed by the Beis Din or by the courts, he says that seems to be above suspicion. Ki mali hu mali acher. Because what difference does it make if he's the one that's accepting the investment? or if a third party is accepting the investment. Masha'ein came b'mechira, and the reason why it's different with selling the assets of the Yisomim, where the optics are not good. So why is it different? He says, she'efsher sha'acher yosif al shumas beistin. He says, because in that situation, even though the Beis has assigned a fixed price they made a valuation on the assets of the orphans. But it's altogether possible that once you bring something to market, to the open market, it may even get a higher price than what the Beis had valuated it for. And it's therefore more proper to bring something to the open market. If you're selling an asset of the orphans, bring it to the open market first before the apotropos can jump the gun and say, I'll buy it myself. This is because then you may be depriving the Yisomim of more income. When it comes to doing an investment where there's a fixed amount on the market for the fees for an investment endeavor, so then it doesn't make a difference because there's standard fees that everyone is entitled to take for an investment, and he's basically saying, I'll be the investor, or I'll be the one to handle the investment, and I'll take the fees for handling the investment instead of me hiring another investment broker to use your money. So I'll be the investment broker, and I'll invest in the various different endeavors that are available out there, and I'll be compensated for that. So that he's allowed to do because he's just doing his job.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Just on that point, it seems to me a little bit concerning for the orphans that that there may not be quite the protection for them there because maybe the investment can go sour or whatever else. That there should be. It's almost like somebody who wants to have their money only in the bank account to make sure that it's going to be there for them, as opposed to investing where things can go sour.
Yeah, well, that's true, but you have to remember that there are no banks in the 18th century when this law is being written that are providing a return on an investment. That's largely a modern invention, where you put money in a bank and the bank gives you a percentage on your return. I don't think that even existed. Certainly didn't exist in the medieval world. So I don't know when that became an innovation. But it's not something that sometimes it's a dereliction of duty of the orphans to just keep the money under a mattress or just keep it safe. Sometimes it's in the best interest of the orphans to invest the money, even though there's a risk. But the Beis Din will make that assessment whether you can justify risking their assets. They'll have to be the ones to make that assessment, because it could be that if you don't invest it, they won't have enough money to last them through their childhood before they're able to start earning a living. And that may be the argument, is that if you don't invest it, they simply won't have enough to feed them, and they'll be subject to having to be given tzedakah because no one else can. They don't have enough money in their estate to support them. So that'll all have to be assessed by the Beis Din, what is in their best interests. But once they say that it's in their best interest to invest a portion of their bank account with an investment broker, then it's perfectly fine for the apotropos to say, I'll be the investment broker and I'll get compensated for that effort, because since it's an open market, he's getting the same fees that anyone else would be getting in that kind of scenario. But as far as purchasing their property, he's not allowed to do that, because if you would take it to the open market, you might get a better fetching price on the assets of the Yisomim, even though the Beis Din has already evaluated what their property is worth. The ha'apotropos eno rashai limkor el eschore, and furthermore, a custodian on an estate, a guardian on an estate, is only allowed to sell schora, to sell the merchandise that is in the possession of the orphans. So, for example, if If the father was a farmer and he had silos of grain, he's allowed to sell that. If he had widgets, he's allowed to sell that. Aval lo karkos umetaltalin ela lefarnesasam. But so that he's allowed to sell in order to be able to sell off the estate of the Yisomim for something that they have no need for. So that an apotropos is unconditionally allowed to do. But what he's not allowed to sell off are the personal effects of the Yisomim. He's not allowed to sell off any real estate or other chattel that they may have in their personal estate, like furniture and things like that. Ela leparnasasam, shenira be'enav shuhu to'elas hayisomim lisa v'litein b'dmeim, unless it's absolutely necessary in order to sustain them, or if it is deemed to be in the best interests of the orphan to use their assets in order to be able to provide for them. Aval limkor ulahaniach hamos aser mishum shevach beis avihem shehunoi v'chavod lahem kisheyesh lahem chafetzim harbe. But he says, but what you're not allowed to do is to sell off their personal effects and save the money. He says that you're not allowed to do. In other words, if they have ample money in their bank account, you can't say, well, I've decided that you don't need the credenza that your father had in his office. He says that you don't need because you kids are, you don't appreciate fine furniture. We can get a huge price. This is a great antique, and I'm going to sell it on your behalf so that when you're older, you'll have more money. That he's not allowed to do because of a concept called shevach beis avihem, the glory or the prestige, I guess would be another way of putting it, of their father's estate. And what that means is that it is considered to be prestigious and honorable for them when they have a lot of assets, a lot of things. In other words, yes, it's true. The guardian wants to protect the children and make sure that they have a lot of money in the bank, but it should not be that he sells off the personal effects of the father in order to be able to have them have a lot of money in the bank, provided that they have enough to eat. As long as they have enough to eat and to get by, it is not permitted for the apotropos to sell off the personal effects. Because it's considered to be to their prestige if they have a lot of personal effects, so that when they get older, they'll have the credenza, they'll have the antiques in the house. Okay, so let's do the Imrei Yaakov. Ve'ein hashaliach rashai limkor la'atzmo. So first we get back to the halacha of a shaliach, that he's not allowed to buy the merchandise himself unless the dispatcher told him that this is the fixed price and I want you to sell it for this, and it's fine. And he told him whatever else you want to, he said this is the fixed price. Ulefizeh yesh li zoher kishiru vein shalach eshlucho sheyimkor o yikna avuro dolarim v'hashaliach yesh lo dolarim. So Rav Stern is coming back to the 1980s example of when an Israeli wants to purchase dollars, which was a very common thing, right? This 1970 something or the 1980 something example where the Israelis are wild about dollars, okay? And a guy says, I want you to purchase dollars for me. And he goes, asks his friend, he says, do me a favor, find someone to take these shekels and convert them into dollars. So the friend says, you know what, I have dollars. I'll do the exchange myself. So he takes the guy's shekels, and instead of going to a money changer, he just changes them himself. The aser lo lemachram b'li yediyas hamishaleach. He says you're not allowed to do that. He says because who knows maybe you could have gotten a better rate had you taken them to a money changer. Chutz im kavalo mechir katsuv avuram kidal kaman v'ayin masher kasafti bibiruram. Unless the person who's purchasing the dollars tells him, look, here's what I want you to do. As long if you can get me the following exchange rate, I'm happy. So the shaliach decides. So if the guy sets for him the exchange rate that he wants for his shekels, then the shaliach is allowed to do it himself, and he doesn't even have to inform his friend that he was doing the exchange on his own without taking him to anyone else. But if he just tells him, get the best rate that you can, the shaliach does not have a right to say, well, I heard that someone's doing it for this amount, I'll give him that rate myself. So that he's not allowed to do. The hamosar shelcha, certainly if the dispatcher says, I just want $10 per widget and any surplus is yours, that for sure is fine. If you notice, he wrote that in parentheses in the text of the Rav Shulchan Aruch. Mishum de'in ze pashat, the das hasma degamim lo amar v'hamosar shelcha rak katzav lo sikum shuvein boch shad. He says, according to some opinions, you don't have to say that explicitly. It's implied. If the dispatcher says, sell these widgets for $10 a piece, and that's the fixed price, that's what I want you to sell them for. So then the shaliach has a right to buy them himself. It's not even if the shaliach says to him, and if you get more, you can keep the surplus. He doesn't have to say that explicitly, according to many opinions. And therefore he's covered. Therefore, he's perfectly fine. Okay, so we've seen we've transitioned from the laws of shaliach to the laws of apotropos today. For the remainder of the chapter, there's two more halachos, halacha tes zayin and halacha yud zayin. Halacha tes zayin is going to deal one more halacha about an apotropos. And then we'll go back to finally one more aspect of shalichus, and then we'll be done with this chapter on the laws of proxyship. Okay, and then we'll start chapter 2, Mirz Hashem, next week, which will be a lot about the laws of ona'ah and genevas das. Remember, ona'ah is taking advantage of someone's ignorance and the value of merchandise that you're either selling or buying. And genevas das is deceiving someone in the course of doing any kind of commercial trading, where you misrepresent a product or you misrepresent a situation to your advantage. And we'll get to all of the details of that halacha, and Mirz Hashem, we'll at least get started on it next week. Okay? Any questions or comments? Let's hear some good and welfare from anyone.
We should be good and not need to go on welfare.
All right, well said.
Rabbi?
Where's everyone davening this Shabbos?
Rabbi, can I just ask a question?
Yes, please.
These days you get things that could also be construed, which when mentioned as not unethical behavior, which are not mentioned over here because they're more recent phenomena. Thinking, for instance, somebody's investing the money and they're churning their investments around.
Someone is, once again?
Investing orphans' money, like in the stock market or something like that, and they're churning their investments. They're buying and selling excessively in order to make some money on the commissions. It would also presumably be unethical, right?
Yeah. Well, anything that would be deemed unethical is unethical, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So not every case necessarily is going to be addressed in this text. Obviously, the person has to extrapolate from here and apply it to other real-world examples. Sure, of course.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Take care.
Okay, Rabbi. Be